So today we're going to talk about oral and poster presentations at conferences. Oral presentations, posters, and then we'll see what you have to do for your exercise for next week, which is to present your research projects. Oral presentations. What do we need to know in advance? How much time will we have, including time for questions and sometimes also discussion? זה לא זז? זה לא זז לכם? לא כמצגת. Just a second, there's a technical problem. Share. Start share רגע. עכשיו אני עושה על המצגת. את רואה את זה כמצגת עכשיו? אני לא. עכשיו זה מצגת או לא?
לא, תרדי מהחץ, תפריש שקופית.
טוב, בסדר. אוקיי. זה לא עובד. אוקיי, לא נורא. נעשה את זה ככה. share screen. אוקיי.
רואים.
So we need to know in advance how much time will we have for the lecture and also for questions and discussions. Usually in scientific conferences, you get a 10-minute presentation followed by 5 minutes of questions and answers. Sometimes in your session, there will be a discussion in the end. But you have to know in advance exactly how long you have. Who's the audience? Is this a conference that only experts in your very narrow topic? Are there experts in your narrow topic, or is it more of a general conference where you have to explain things? This is important to know how to present, if you need to present in lay terms or in easier, and to explain certain concept and certain techniques, or if everybody understands in advance. For example, if I join like an infectious disease conference, maybe the first few bullets, and I want to do a lecture on malaria, then maybe the first few bullet points should be about malaria. What is malaria and the burden of malaria globally. But if I go to a malaria conference, then I don't need these bullet points because everybody there knows what malaria is and what is the burden. So then maybe I go directly into something more specific, like if I'm going to talk about prevention control, or if I'm going to talk about finding a new vaccine. And it's important to know who the other speakers are, especially in your session, and what they're going to present. So you know where you fit in the session. And you can even refer to the other speakers' presentations in a sentence or two. So those are the important things to know in advance. In a 10-minute presentation, you should have around 10 slides. So it's 1 slide per minute. Here we have, it adds up to 12 slides, but it includes the title and the acknowledgement slides that are very short to present. Then after the title, you have the background, study aims, methods, results, discussion, conclusions, and recommendations. And it's always good to have an acknowledgement slide in the end, because when you do research, you're never alone. You have co-authors, co-investigators that you have to thank. You have your patients that you're getting the data from. you have the hospital staff. So you always have a lot of people to thank, and it's very important to acknowledge these people. The slides should be simple, structured, consistent, and have a consistent type of heading, a consistent way of putting bullet points, fewer words. Don't have all the words that you're going to say written down in the slide. Nobody wants to see you reading out your slide. You have to have bullet points and talk more. You need to use a big font size that people can see from far away. Use a lot of images when you can, but not images that don't have to do with the actual presentation. What I mean by images is graphs and figures, but not just funny images from the internet. And then you can use funny images from the internet, but only 1 or 2 in each presentation and not on every single slide, because that's not serious. And then capital letters are more difficult to read, so avoid using all capital letters. So you should have a clear title. The title should also show people where you are in your lecture. Are you in the background, methods, results, conclusions? Have that as a clear title. Then write short and concise bullet points. Don't have overcrowded slides with too much text and too much figures on them. And use tables and graphs when it's appropriate. So this, see, now it doesn't work with the, because we're not watching this as a slideshow. This was supposed to come up later, but anyways. So this is actually a pretty good table for an article, but what do you think about it as a table for a slide? Well, you got the answer now because I couldn't do the animation. It's not a good table to put on a slide. It's too small, there's too many details. So if you want to use a table in a slide, I suggest you prepare a simple table with not so many figures, bigger numbers. Maybe you can skip the N and just go with the percentages. Maybe you can only show significant results. And also maybe you can use a figure instead.
I think sometimes when I made presentations in the past and I use tables,
yeah,
I highlighted what I was trying to show. So I mean, I put the actual table because I think it gives a good impression that I'm taking the data straight from the article, but I pointed out what I want to say. So I put a box around it or something.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't leave the people who are watching the presentation looking for the data. I pointed it out.
But the stuff that you highlighted, could they actually see it, or was it too small? Can't hear you. You're on mute.
I remuted myself. They can see it. We can see everything, but it's hard and we have to look. So if I point it out,
yeah,
they can see it and they know where to look.
Yes,
that's what I think.
Yeah, I agree with highlighting things and even like using animation. It didn't work this time, to circle important results that you want them to look at. But I think that also you should make an effort to simplify the table and make it more visually easier to visualize, because yeah, but it's, of course, it's a choice that you have, and just try to make it more simple and everything. And then I don't think people will think that your work isn't serious if you don't show all of the data, because if for that, they will have to read the full article. And yeah, so, and of course, everybody knows that you're not presenting everything you have in the presentation, and we'll talk about it later with the contents of the presentation. Maybe it's much nicer if there's a lot of data points. This isn't the case here, but in any case, When you can use figures, the figures should be simple. This isn't good just because I copy pasted it from an article. So of course you should not do that. You should make a figure and copy paste it straight from the Excel or wherever you made the figure. But this is a pretty good figure in that it's simple and it shows the trend very easily. So it's very easy to understand, and with what you're going to say, people can get the idea really quickly. In the slides, you should not write everything that you're going to say. For example, if you want to say, we conducted a retrospective study which included all patients who attended the ER, you're not going to write down the whole sentence. You can make bullet points, study design, retrospective, all ER patients. And when you talk, you say a full sentence, but it doesn't have to be written down on the slide. Avoid karaoke slides where you just read out what's on the slide. That's not a good way to go. Karaoke slides, yeah. So there's a 5x5 rule that you should have no more than 5 bullet points per slide and 5 words in a row. As I said, one slide should be on average about 1 minute. You should spend 1 minute on each slide, I mean. Use the fonts, the sans serif fonts that are very clean and simple, that are easy to read from far away. And use a minimum font size of 24. Less than that, people will not be able to read.
Neta, isn't the difference whether you present in a small room or like in a conference front? If it's a big ulam?
No, because usually the screen size also changes according to the room. So okay. I think, yeah, I don't think so. Okay, this is an example of a bad slide. First of all, it's on a dark background, and it's easier to read on a white background or a light background. And don't use backgrounds with like patterns or anything, because that drives people crazy. They can't see anything. So why is this not a good slide? So we have an inconsistency in the font types, in the font sizes and the font colors. It doesn't need to be colorful. It's not a work of art. It's science. You need to be serious. Of course, you can put something fun here and there, but you have to be consistent also with the bullet points. Are you going to put a point period at the end of the sentences or not? You have to decide in advance and be consistent, because some people, and especially people that are, oh shoot. Okay, our meeting is going to end in 10 minutes and then you just reconnect, okay? So people, especially people in science, are sometimes a little bit OCD. So if there's not like a point at the end of the sentence, it'll be the only thing they remember about the presentation. So try to be consistent. And here, this side is way too crowded. What does it say? Yeah, don't use font size of less than 24. Now I will add a long text that I could surely shorten by bullet points, but instead I just keep writing every single word that I'm going to say. And notice how I added too many irrelevant pictures and images. So, and also this is the font size that we shouldn't be using. This is the serif. This is Times New Roman, which is great for articles, but not great for presentations. Okay. Yes, so up to now we talked about what the slides should look like.
Neta, again, once I heard that for a bigger space, it's better dark background and smaller spaces white, and you say always white.
I don't know that, I know. So in 10 minutes, we're gonna disconnect and then we're all gonna connect again. Is it the same link or do you have to send out a different link? Okay, so I know. So when the 10 minutes are up and we're disconnected, just wait for a second link that we're going to send you. I didn't hear about that, but maybe.
Okay. So you say, but for us, you say always white is safer.
It's easier to read. You see, it's hard to read this, even though
here on the computer, but what happens in a big space? I was told, and that's how I build my presentations, that for a big space, it's better to do a dark background with light. I use usually blue with yellow. The yellow looks good on blue.
I don't think
you say always white, so
yeah, but I mean, people do it differently. You know, you can decide, but it's not recommended to do a dark background.
No, if it's not recommended, I can change everything. I'm just asking because someone told me many years ago that for a big space, it's better to put a dark background.
Okay,
you didn't hear about that.
I'll look into it. I'll try to find out. I'll ask Michael.
Okay.
Now a little bit about the content. When you do your research, you're going to have a lot of different results and everything's going to seem very interesting to you, and you're going to want to cramp up all those results into this presentation, but don't do it. Find your single overriding communication objective. Find what you want as a take-home message, what you want people to remember. And yeah, so and then minimize and don't put all your results, only those that prove your that single objective. So if you use SOCO, people suggest to put it in the center. So you start with your conclusions slide with your SOCO, with your take-home message. And then, of course, you make recommendations based on that conclusion. And then you go backwards in the slide preparation. I'm talking about preparing the slide, not the slide presentation itself. But when you prepare the slides, you first go with the conclusion, you make the recommendations, then you go back to the results and you use the results supporting your conclusion, your main conclusion, and the methods that you use to get to those results and the relevant background. Is this understood? Because you're going to get many different results, but it's important to know that you don't have to put everything in there. If people want to know everything, they're going to find your article and read it. Okay, so don't try to cramp in too much information into one presentation. Now the script, what you're actually going to say, because you have the presentation, you have the slides, and then what are you going to say? So, you know, when you give a lecture to students, a 45-minute lecture to students, you can improvise. You don't have to maybe prepare as much. You maybe put in a funny story and reminisce about the past. But when you have a 10-minute presentation, you really have to think about what you're going to say. You have to prepare yourself. You have to prepare lecture notes, but don't read the lecture notes. You have to talk to the audience. You can't read the lecture notes, but have bullet points on every slide, what you need to say on each slide, and in case you black out. Practice and time yourself. You have, if they say 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes. Nobody appreciates a person going overtime or you know, sometimes they have to like kick you off the stage because you're late. It's not a nice experience. And you don't want to also be rushing through your last slides because you got delayed. So you really have to practice and time yourself. And also try it on a colleague, because colleagues can tell you what was more understood, what was less understood. They can find mistakes in your slides. So really prepare, giving an oral presentation is a show, you know, it's show business. It's you really have to practice for it, and you really have to do it in the right way. And when you present, don't hide behind the computer and don't just look at your presentation. You have to look at the audience and maintain eye contact with them. you have to avoid saying things like, you know, when we talk, we use those a lot. But when you prepare for your presentations, you really have to think about it and be conscious of not doing that. And you can have silences in between, and you don't have to fill them with you know. Here we go. See? It's natural when we talk, but when we give a presentation, it's not so nice. So use a rhetorical question and pauses to make it more interesting. As I said before, don't read your notes. It used to be more acceptable in the past that people just read the notes, but today it's really about presenting and being interesting and speak with confidence and excitement. Don't make the other people go to sleep, the audience. Questions and answers is maybe the scariest part of a presentation, because you can prepare the slides and you can prepare what you're going to say, but you can never prepare for a difficult question to answer, and you don't know what questions are going to be thrown at you. But think about possible questions in advance and practice on how to answer those. Ask your colleagues to ask you questions maybe. Prepare 2 to 3 extra slides with extra results just in case someone asks for more detail. Like we talked about before, Chovav, if you have only certain, if you make a smaller table, then maybe the full table can come in those extra 2 to 3 slides. If someone asks you specifically about something, you can show them the results. Listen to the questions very carefully and understand the question. And if you don't understand the question, tell them to repeat the question until you do understand what they've asked. Write down the questions if needed. Some people who ask questions start with, firstly, I would like to know this and this, and secondly, this and this, and lastly, I would like to, and how do you feel about that? So you can't remember those questions, you have to write them down. Be very polite to the people who ask the questions. We have 1 minute, so after we disconnect, please try to reconnect as soon as we send out the link. So thank the person who's asking, be very polite, answer briefly and precisely. And after we reconnect, we're going to talk about what you do if you don't know the answer. So I think we'll stop now and disconnect and then continue.